Welcome to Proven Sustainable Conversations, a collection of thought-provoking talks with Indigenous and Maroon people and their supporters to realize and challenge our conscious and unconscious colonized thinking and behaviors.
I wanted to just take a moment to honor the sacred moment that we're all here together enjoying. Families coming together, communities coming together on this beautiful land, and in ways that give back to the land. So I'm really honored to be here with y'all, and just to honor the great mystery and the great spirit and the powers of the four directions. So thank you very much. Appreciate y'all. Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to continue to set the scene and speak to place and the significance of that. So you grew up in the middle of the Everglades, correct? And it is a place that was really woven with your ancestors' wisdom and has been influenced by colonizer and imperial pain throughout the years. Can you kind of take us there and explain a little bit what it was like growing up in that setting and upbringing?
Nice. Thank you. So I'm happy to be here, especially here with y'all, because yesterday I was cruising around trying to find my way here, and I realized that this is like the headwaters of the Everglades watershed. And it actually begins just not too far from here, a little bit further north at Shingle Creek. So I had the opportunity to visit Shingle Creek twice yesterday. That was really cool. So just imagine that the watershed, the headwaters of the Everglades where I live, begin in this general area, and they flow south through the Kissimmee River into Lake Okeechobee. It also enters into different canals these days. But where I live is in the River of Grass section of this greater Everglades watershed that I'm talking about. So when you're there, it's like a vast flatness that is dotted with tree islands. A lot of different kinds of grasses, especially sawgrass, dominates the wetlands that I'm a part of. And just to the west of where I live is the Big Cypress Forest. And there's a slight elevation difference, like really slight, that gives way to all these beautiful plant communities over there. And to the east of me where is the urban areas of Miami, Dade, Broward counties, and all of that is built up on this rock formation, the Atlantic Coastal Ridge, which is also a little bit higher. So it's kind of like the Everglades where I'm living, the wetlands, is nestled in between these different geologies over there. So that's where I live. And the place pulsates with the blessings of the wet season and the dry season. And so these days, unfortunately, it's a little bit quieter. Like, what happened to all the biodiversity? So if you were to speak of the Everglades in terms of like art, you can call it an Everglades minimalism these days. But the word in the Miccosukee language that we use to describe the grasses is the same word that we use to describe whiskers or body hair. So you could think of the Everglades back then being a lot more hairier, a lot more noisier, and a lot more abundant than it is these days. But I think that if we work together, we can see that biodiversity thrive again, because that's what gives me hope when I was coming up this way, remembering my visit to the Kissimmee River. And there's some really awesome restoration projects that are happening there. And it's really awesome to see that once the water is flowing right and you have good water quality and things like that, the plants come back, the animals come back. So that's what gives me hope. And just keep in mind that even though we're calling this area the River of Grass in the daytime, at night it becomes the River of Stars. And I'm sure you saw that last night too.
Yeah, we had stargazing, and hopefully there will be that tonight as well. And I'm curious if you could speak to, amongst the grasses and the trees and the rivers, were any of those used as lessons in your childhood, or can you share like a specific story in your childhood that really interconnected with that place and other living beings?
So I guess I would talk about the first plant is the swamp bay, which is part of the laurel family. And we talk about that one first because that's just how we do it in our protocol, in our spiritual protocol. Whenever we're going to do create a plant medicine that has a bunch of different recipe ingredients like plant leaves or roots or whatever, or barks, like this is the first plant that we always gather as part of that protocol. So the swamp bait has a lot of different applications. You can use it for body issues, for mental issues, or even spiritual problems to help you bring you back into balance. And growing up, like I suffered a lot from like bad dreams, and so like that was one of the applications for using this bay leaf as an incense. You burn the bay leaf and you pass it around the body 4 times, and that'll help restore you to good dreams. So that really helped me growing up. And ask me the question again.
Yeah, no, I think you answered it, so you don't feel like you have to more. But
Okay.
I was just thinking about your childhood, if there was any specific ways that the plants, the trees, the grass, like influenced your childhood. You had any fond memories you wanted to share?
Yeah, that. And I guess also just realizing that since these things are in danger, it was also a call to me to do what we can to make sure that they're there for the next generation. Yeah.
Yeah, really thinking of the ancestors to come and your lineage, yes. And drawing on this deep connection to place and your earth-centered culture and framings, can you speak a little bit to how that informs your tribe's approach to environmental work and, talking about specifically the biannual research you do in the Everglades?
Cool. So the reason we're doing this kind of environmental conservation work out there is so that we can keep the joyous things of our lives continuing, like the ceremonies and the rituals, and also just the sense of family that we have out there. And so what the community has been doing these days is finding ways to like bring the best of both worlds or many worlds together, different knowledge systems together. And these days we're doing this with scientific monitoring of the water, the plants, and the animals out there. And it also is like a community effort, right? So we do something in the spring and we also do something in the fall. We just finished up our fall Everglades study, and it's a pretty cool experience. It's like if you ever have a chance to join us, you'll see there's like a swarm of airboats, like 15 or 20 or even 25 airboats cruising around the Everglades together. And we're doing a couple different things. We're gathering data, right? Measuring water quality, seeing what animals are there or not. But we're also finding ways to record like the tribal side, the knowledge, the history, the lore, the medicine. And we're trying to find ways to report that together. So I guess it's also becoming like a formatting challenge, right? Like, what do you emphasize? What do you put on the paper? And how do you get that sort of information on the paper anyway? So the scientific studies that we're doing out there are really fun. And we've been kind of setting the standard out there as a community, the Miccosukee tribe. A number of years ago, they set the first water quality standard. How clean are we trying to get the water? Now they've set standards for how much water should flow, flows and levels. Now, this past fall, in the study, they put out some machines to test air quality. So I think we're going to be setting air quality standards out there in the Everglades soon. Yeah.
And then what questions do you ask in addition to some of the more common or forefronted Western scientific questions when you're doing this research that may broaden to considering the heritage or the plants and trees in different ways as your relatives?
Well, there was it seems like a simple question to be asking, but sometimes people don't think about simple questions. For example, there was an opportunity that me and my colleagues had to work with water modeling scientists from the different state districts, right? And they had different ways of running the numbers, but we were asking them if they could run the numbers in a way that saves the most tree islands. And that was a different sort of question that they hadn't considered. So things like that. Also, like when we're talking about home, it's to have an expanded definition of home. It's not just the structure, it's the island, or it's the ecosystem, or it's the watershed, like that's home. So how can we expand definitions? How can we go beyond boundaries? And how can we create new categories? I think that's like some questions that we ask. But also, how can we design experiments so that we can support our gardening practices? How can we design experiments so that we can have access to these plant medicines? So one of the cool things that we're doing now is also analyzing, getting back to this bay, the bay tree, the swamp bay. There was an issue with this with the laurel family a couple of years ago, the laurel wilt disease that was harming these plants. But now we're realizing that some of these plants are a little bit more resilient than others, like the one that's standing in my front yard. So I'm like, can we like look and see what is making that particular plant hardier or stronger? So things like that. How can we design experiments to support plant medicines? How can we design experiments to support our gardens? Things like that.
So drawing on what you just said about the tree in front of your house and how to maybe make it more resilient, and you were talking about, you referenced home and expanding that notion. Are there examples you could speak to about term, like a specific term such as home, and what is that term in Miccosukee versus English, and how the definitions or common understandings of those influence our way of relating and navigating that when it comes to science and everyday life?
Well, not necessarily science related, but I've been thinking about the creation of new words and new phrases when it comes to the arts.
Yeah.
Because we really don't have a word for art in Miccosukee language these days, like what other communities might describe as what we call a dance, they might call choreography. What we call a chant could be a song or a concert. But art in general, like we really don't have a term for such an abstract concept these days. So we're trying to create those terms. And I guess it depends, like, what is the function of art for us, for our community, for me anyway. And I think that I get back to the inspiration of the spiritual practice and the medicine and the joys that represents. So for me, I guess the artistic philosophy is based on things that bring you joy. So that's what we're calling art these days. Things that bring you joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is Yat Ishafatzliti. That's how do we make people happy? And I think that's the definition of art that I'm using these days.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I think another challenge that I'm dealing with these days in terms of the LGBTQ community, especially because we're celebrating that more and more in our communities these days, is terms for gender diversity. Because we have, in Miccosukee world, our own traditions of like third gender and things like that, but those particular terms are sacred, right? So how do we come up with a term that we can use more publicly, more openly, more secularly? So that's the challenge that we've been dealing with. We haven't found a solution yet, but I think that's something that we're looking forward to.
It's important.
Basically, it's about making sure that we give each other the respect that we deserve, bring more people into the community, and seeing what kind of songs or what kind of dances that you want to share. So I think that's what it's about, like not leaving anybody out.
100%.
Yeah.
And how does spirit and play into that? You just touched on, right? We segued from talking about scientific studies in the Everglades to your work exploring the significance of art and artists as part of this. You see the connection between art and spirituality and the environment. So I guess want to expand upon that, the significance of combining those two.
And I guess I want to get back to how we are trying to decolonize the scientific process, right? And I guess one of the basic ways we're trying to do that is when it comes to the scientific process, sometimes we get to formulate questions or sometimes we start from certain places. And I think that being able to refer to other systems when it comes to these decision points is a great way of decolonizing that process. For example, when it comes to our Everglades study work, we're trying to do things that respect the circle of life. So when it comes to a decision, how can we make that decision that respects that? Or how can we make a decision that uplifts or honors that or helps that to continue? And so I think that that's one of the ways that we're bringing and overlapping the spiritual concerns of the circle of life with the scientific tools and those kind of things that they offer. This reminds me of a story from my own life. Growing up with my grandfather, my late grandfather, Howard Billy Sr., he was a cool dude. And when I started to like figure out who I was or was starting to figure out who I was, I used to hang out with him a lot. And he's the one that taught me how to carve wood from cypress wood. So I used to hang out with him after school and check out all his crazy tools. And some of his crazy tools were pretty bent and crooked. And he had some knives that he would bend himself into like little hooks and use the hooks to like carve his canoes. Or when he would go out hunting, like he would make his own bullets with the gunpowder and all that. And he knew his way around the herb garden, working with medicine men and medicine women. So he's that kind of guy. But what I'm getting at is bending the tools so that we can use them for our purposes. And I think that that's a metaphor for what we're trying to do with decolonizing the scientific method. We're bending those tools so that it is able to uphold our own cultural practices. And so I think that bending the knife is like one of the things that like is an image that stays with me. Like it's as a way of overlapping spiritual practices with scientific techniques.
It's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. With bringing your grandfather in too.
Yeah.
Also, then segueing from how nature, as one of those expanded perspectives and a very important ecosystem to use to inform, how has nature informed your understanding, or do you believe it can inform our understanding of diversity, gender, sexuality, and that element of identity relating?
Again, getting back to the circle of life, we need everybody. We need everybody's input. We need everybody's joy. And I think that having an understanding or having that sort of vision and heart is something that reminds us that like we can't leave anybody out. And we need everybody at the table to help us make these decisions about life or death, joy or grief. Like we need everybody's input to navigate that way forward. So I think that that's what the land shows us, that the biodiversity, the circle of life, and how not to leave anybody out. I think that's what it reminds us. Yeah.
Yes. Can you speak to the framing that you've used calling queer ecological archive?
Nice. Okay, thank you. So I've been having a lot of fun with that because the archive of queer eco knowledge, it's inspired by traditional eco knowledge, right? And namely like indigenous eco knowledges, right? So it's not necessarily queer ecology, but more like the knowledge that we have around that, by created by queer people, LGBTQ, gender diverse people. That's what we're talking about. And when we're talking about the inspiration from traditional eco knowledge, that's the stories. That's the medicine, that's the protocol, that's the cultural practices, and the storytelling and the relationships and the generational knowledge that is built up around that community. That's the traditional eco knowledge that I'm talking about, that inspires the version that is being created by LGBTQ people. So I hope to learn more about QEK here. Like maybe there are queer eco artists, storytellers, musicians, or even just friends and allies. I'm just here to listen to your songs and hear your poems and maybe tell a few stories and get to know y'all better. So maybe we get to add to that archive here, queer eco knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you for.
But that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Just collecting stories, collecting songs, and sharing that with people.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And is there anything else you want to add to? I want to respect, you said, the sacredness of some of the terms that you use in defining gender and identity within the native language and framings. But you do use the term identify as two-spirit. Can you speak to that a little bit, or
what two-spirit is about?
Yeah.
Cool. So it's a movement of gender diversity, and it's also a movement of decolonization. And so what that means is bringing back things that were lost or hidden as a way of surviving, right? And so what we're talking about is the consequences of the colonization process. Folks came in here to this land and thought they knew better. And so because of that, causing a lot of harm to indigenous communities, indigenous folks had to hide a lot of things, or they lost a lot of things, a lot of knowledge, a lot of practices, a lot of ceremonies. And so perhaps those things that went underground, we feel that it may be a time to bring those things back above ground, back into our communities, back into the circle. So that's what the Two-Spirit movement is about. It's about bringing the hidden knowledge, bringing the lost knowledge back into the communities, specifically indigenous communities, so that we can have a fuller circle. But when it comes to the decolonization side, again, it's just remembering that there's more than one way of being, there's more than one way of thriving, and it's about making folks feel comfortable enough to step forward into that circle.
Yeah. Is there a recent passion of revitalization that you want to speak to?
And so, again, coming back to the Two-Spirit movement and how it applies to our community, like we've been bringing it here to Miccosukee and to Seminole in the past few years. Even though like we have our own traditional ways of gender diversity, those practices tend to be a little bit more secret and private. So we're trying to find ways to just be more public and more out and more part of the community these days. And so we're doing that with Miccosukee Pride festivals. We celebrated our 4th Pride Festival this year. If you got time, come on down next year. Things like that. Support groups. We meet a lot often, like online, on Zoom, or things like that. Mutual aid, showing up for each other, stuff like that.
Yeah. Nice. And you also, so expanding upon that, the support groups and LGBTQ and Pride, and you've spoken about an element of chosen family before. And so can you speak of chosen family as it relates to your Two-Spirit efforts? And then let's segue that to your Love the Everglades movement and want to dive into that too.
Well, chosen family, there's definitely a Florida tradition of chosen family and mutual aid. When we remember the long journey of the Seminole people and the Miccosukee people, there was a time when our communities were at war with the United States of America. And when it comes to chosen families, we know that there were communities of folks that were self-liberating themselves from the horrors of enslavement. And so we're talking about the Seminole people adopting these folks into the tribe as chosen family, as an example of showing up for each other and helping each other out in this time of need, of mutual aid. So we have this tradition of chosen family and mutual aid here in Florida. And so when it came to using the arts, building community, and standing up for the land, which is what the Love the Everglades movement about, that's what we were inspired by. Who can we choose as our family, and who can we show up for, and how can we show up for them? So one of the ways that we're doing that is with the creative solidarity with the natural world. And we're all part of the natural world. So how can we show up for each other too?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And when we got into the doing what we can to stand up for the land, Love the Everglades movement, we also had a sense of urgency, right? Because even though a lot of us are artists and a lot of us work in interfaith and multi-faith, like Miccosukee folks are always frustrated that we're not doing things fast enough to help the land. And so we felt that way. We also met up with some folks from the arts communities, especially Mary Jo Augustin, who's an art historian. And she talks a lot about critiquing eco-art. Again, it's not doing things fast enough. So that sense of urgency from the arts, that sense of urgency from the indigenous community, my home community, really spurred us to do what we can to get things done now. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the partnerships that I wanted to name being present here today, right, is with the composting, right? So do you want to speak to that a little bit and then name any other current or upcoming partnerships or initiatives you're really excited about?
Nice. Okay, cool. So I'm really loving this new project that the nonprofit is working on. The nonprofit is called Love the Everglades Movement. And the project that we're working on is called Everglades Earth Cycle. And so it's about changing values, changing behaviors so that we can be giving back more to the land. And so I think that part of that solution is worm juice. Part of that solution is composting. And I'm going to ask my friend to talk a little bit more about it. But this is a project that we just started recently. with partners that include folks from Fertile Earth Worm Farm. Just to emphasize how awesome this project is, I really appreciate that it's like about solutions, because coming from the Everglades and dealing with a lot of these problems caused by fertilizers and caused by pesticides, and I'm like, we could get rid of all that with this process. This is so cool. So plus solutions.
So expanding on that too, speaking of like partnerships and bringing in other communities and chosen family, I wanted to see if you could speak a little bit also to the reverend part of your name and choosing to be involved with the Universalist Church and what the journey that brought you to that decision and the significance of it.
So that started out because of growing up in Miccosukee world, Miccosukee universe, and understanding what those spiritual practices are, right? And what I mean is that in my community, the families are organized as large clans or extended families that are named after different animals or aspects of nature. For example, I'm from the otter family. My dad is from the bird family. My late grandfather, the woodcarver, is from the wind family. Some great grandparents are from the panthers. So these are all different families that we're a part of, right? And each of these families, they all have their own rituals, their own ceremonies, and their own gifts to share. So growing up, we realized that maybe some folks do things a little bit different than I do. Or maybe you have your own special words or languages that only your family uses. Or in ceremonial times, your family is the one that leads that particular dance, and we have to back you up in a certain way. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about different families or clans, the gifts that they have and the contributions that they have. So growing up, it was about giving each other respect like that and giving each other the space to do the things that we need to do in our own ways. And so basically, I just extended that to other traditions and other faiths and other practices. Give the Christians, give the Buddhists, give everybody else the respect that they deserve and give them the space to practice. And so that's really the origin of my universalism. It's an extension of Miccosukee practices. And so that's what it's about. For me, anyway, that's how I entered into universalism. And the whole ministry thing, I interpret ministry as just who are we helping out? And so the community that I've chosen to help out is nature. So I like to be help folks get familiar with the place, help folks walk in the woods, help folks find this particular plant medicine, or just point out these particular constellations and what they mean, things like that. So I think that's my entry into universalism, just extending Miccosukee practices.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the way you explained that with the clans and then how that extends outward. So as we start to wrap up, and I want to try and create some space for people to ask questions before the next session too. For those who here are interested in decolonizing their practice and with permaculture in their lives, what recommendations or invitations do you have for them?
I think how can we use our practices to build community? How can we use our practices to strengthen other communities like Indigenous folks, Black folks, immigrant folks? I think these are some important questions to consider as a way of beginning to do that. Who are we helping? How are we giving back? And how are we making the circle bigger?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And then, you've referenced Love the Everglades. Are there any other resources, platforms online that people can check out to learn more and or support you and these important initiatives that you're involved with?
So first things first is learn more about what the Indigenous scientists are doing locally. In Florida, we have two official tribes, the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida and the Seminole Tribe of Florida. These are the two tribes of Florida today. So learn, visit, and support their scientific work. Voices of the River of Grass is an arts nonprofit that supports Indigenous artists. Learn about them. And
You love the Everglades.
Love the Everglades movement. We like to get together for our special events, conferences, actions, art making and stuff. So find us on social media. Come to our events. Come to our gardens. Let's have a cookout.
We hope you found this conversation insightful and thought-provoking. Please like and follow the Proven Sustainable podcast to spread the word and stay tuned for more engaging dialogues. Additional information and resources are available within the episode description and online at provensustainable.org.